Movie time. I haven't made one for a while. And in this exciting time of Corona, I'd like to put it into a far from equilibrium thermodynamic perspective so we can get a good view of what's really going on. So, many people who follow my way of thinking understand that flowing energy organizes matter, and that ultimately is responsible for everything that we have, everything that we are, everything that we make. Comes from the fact that flowing energy generates complexity always by balancing opposing forces. We see that in living systems directly with the balance between sugar and fat, but there are analogies to that that occur in our systems, our financial systems, all of the systems that constitute the complexity of society are in fact flow dependent. A financial system doesn't work if the money doesn't flow, and hence the danger of what's happened with this pandemic, because our entire biosphere is a flow dependent system, and we have evolved dependent on a kind of stability. We know the seasons come and go, and you know where you live and what that means, etc. But what's been happening, and I've been warning about this for really at least a decade or two, is that when a system like the biosphere is going to undergo a gross change, the variables that constitute that system start to go, instead of like this, they go, and there's so much energy flowing through the system that it disrupts everything and creates these extreme vibrations of the variables that make up the system. For example, species, we're losing species. So we're losing species at an abnormally high rate. That's now a fluctuation above the norm. Similarly, we're seeing migrations of humans. We're seeing changes in the tides. We're seeing changes in weather patterns. So, on the whole, what we're talking about really is that the test tube, planet Earth, is undergoing a far from equilibrium phase change. And the energy that's powered everything, but including our society, because our society has been so much driven by more aggressive, greedy, unconscious types, blips, backward looking people who are typically cannabinoid deficient and a little more uptight. That's the greed there, is to satisfy their concerns. When you don't have enough cannabinoids, you don't adjust well to change. And all change, even if it's good, means adjustment, which means free radicals are going to be involved and essentially biochemical stress. So if you are unfortunately enough to be of that ilk, especially depending on how far you go to the blip side, as I call it, blip dumb, then you're going to not be able to really open your mind enough to embrace new things. These people work very well by learning something and being able to focus and stick to it. And hence, those are the people who will naturally emerge in at least the first round of creating things in general. They're aggressive, they're trying, they have a lot of energy to move things forward that way, but they are not doing it with the right motivation. The motivation should be not only self enlightenment, but also self cooperation with everyone else, because ultimately everything is always about cooperation. That's how flowing energy organizes matter. It starts with two molecules, bringing them together, and then building on that. And that's what we've done with our societies. Unfortunately, we've accumulated too much noise, too much entropy. There's too much crap floating around because the initial intent, at least verbally, that goes behind creating many of our flow dependent structures is very different from what they turned out to be, again, because of being driven by blips. So if we look at healthcare as a prime example, we don't have healthcare, we have wealth care. The whole system is designed to make money. Now, I'm all in favor of capitalism. That means you grow new things, you create new things, you explore them. That's what life's about. But when it's all driven by greed rather than, what can we do for each other, what is intellectually pleasing, what is artistically pleasing, creativity in all of its manifestations, those are not what drives us. So we have wealth care, we do not have health care. And as a consequence of that, the amount of money that flows through that structure is huge. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars between insurance and doctors' costs and payoffs to the politicians. So what we've done is instead of having kind of a higher level of organization in our flows that's designed to benefit people, we have organization that's designed to benefit the few. And as a consequence, we have this partition between the wealthy and the poor. I'm not talking about socialism. I'm talking about capitalism with a consciousness, where the people that are running it and making it, the people expressing their creativity, are expressing their creativity not because they're greedy morons, but because they're conscious individuals who want to participate in improving the world. So what's happened now is, in this time of change, the weakness of our structure, of our flow-dependent social structure, is now being manifest. We can't, for example, continue to make poison food and make poison air. People now realize, hey, there's something called sun, if you live in some of these polluted places like Delhi or Peking. So people are now going to have a very clear picture in their mind of what could be. And they're going to not tolerate when the government doesn't provide that direction, not in a socialist sense, but to facilitate rather than impede the development of a population's health, which is what they've done by outlawing cannabis as a prime example. Here we have this one magical compound, this plant rather, that is able to tap into ourselves, because everything in our body from conception until death is regulated by our cannabinoid system, which is involved in balancing between the sugar burning and the fat burning. And when they're in the right balance, you can have the creativity of your turned on, stoned, happy mind, electron transport system working well, you're providing energy efficiently, or, you turn things off. And you need to do that at times. That's why we sleep, for example. CB2 activity turns on fat burning, turns on cellular recycling, purging. That's what's going on right now in our society, because all of the weak spots, as well as strong, good spots, have collapsed because we've impeded the flow, because the idiots in government, actually the idiot experts who didn't know what they're talking about because they don't understand how life works, they basically took advantage of Trump's ignorance, because he is not scientifically oriented, and he had no choice but to follow them because of the presence and power that they've accumulated over the decades of their lying pathological bullshit with Big Pharma. Big Pharma does never try to really solve problems. It tries to hide the problems, so you become dependent on the drugs to hide the problems, and you keep the problems. And that way you need more and more drugs, and everybody in the big pharmaceutical industry is happy, and you get sick and die. It doesn't have to be that way as it currently exists. And the prime example of this is right now in this corona situation, where NAC, N-acetylcysteine, a natural compound that your body makes that has very profound antioxidant activity. It inhibits free radicals by directly quenching them. It does this by recharging your body's main antioxidant, or one of your main antioxidants, glutathione, that gets used up each time it quenches a free radical. So you got to recharge it again so it can do it again. And that's what NAC does. And a 1997 study in Italy at the beginning of the flu season, throughout the flu season, where people were administered NAC, take it yourself, over the counter, no problem. They found that you had the same number of people infected with or without NAC. But the people who didn't have NAC, 79% had symptomatic infections, whereas only 25% had symptomatic infections when they took NAC. And this was, in general, in a vulnerable population. So it was done under conditions for H1N1, but if you understand how things work, you can subdivide things into all of these little minuscule label differences, but in reality, it's excess free radical production causing cells to die, or in other cases, causing blood to clump, promoting things like all the coagulation problems and clotting problems that are being now identified in people who've had COVID. So there is a systematic overview, a systemic overview. And on the blood end of it, It has to do with angiotensin. And I'm putting together a nice presentation. It takes a while because it's very complicated. But in fact, the whole angiotensin system, just like CB1 and CB2 turns on fat and sugar burning, fat for CB2, sugar for CB1, we have a similar phenomena occurring with the activation of some of the angiotensin receptors, ones that are pro-inflammatory and ones that are anti-inflammatory. So this universal necessary dialogue that occurs between fat and sugar burning in order to control free radical production, where the free radicals are the signals that create all the changes. It's all feedback, you see. So anyway, that's probably enough babbling for now. Make sure you take your vitamin C, of course, your vitamin D, your NAC, your NAC, and your CBD, and all of those things will help you tremendously because they will either be antioxidants or they will turn on fat burning, which will promote recycling, which will turn off the electron transport system, which is what happens when you burn sugar, which is how you can induce apoptosis. So we don't want our lung cells to die when the virus infects them. The stupid thing to do would be to use chloroquine as opposed to something that would inhibit sugar burning, because fat burning is the protective recycling. The viruses need the sugar carbohydrate energy, the efficient energy, to build up their supplies of themselves, of their pieces, so they could then go on and assemble them to then finally release particles. And in general, that's more where you would see fat burning involved. That's not exactly true. It's more complicated, but in general, you want to prevent the problem. You prevent the problem by turning off the sugar burning. You don't turn off the fat burning, and just because you see some positive effects, it's not the right thing to do. It promotes heart issues for a number of reasons. Turning off fat burning, your heart is burning fat all the time because it's always recycling itself, because it's always beating, it's always making free radicals. 60%, 65% or more of your heart's energy comes from fat burning. You turn it off, you're asking for heart problems, they occur. Do not think that chloroquine is a safe, happy drug. NAC is a safe, happy drug. And if you mix it with CBD, you will eliminate asthma. We're seeing it with so many people. It's mind-blowing. This is going to totally perturb the big pharma industry because this is over-the-counter, inexpensive. Peace and love. Get high.